He retired in 2018. His 116 touchdown catches is the all-time record for NFL tight ends. Gates also holds the Chargers record for most receptions, 955, and most receiving yards, 11,841. Gates is the 15th Chargers player to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
They can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary.
On Saturday, February 22nd, you are invited to A Night with the Panthers, a special fundraiser dedicated to supporting Black Panther veterans who now require assistance with essential needs such as medicine, food, and housing. These Black Panther veterans championed human rights, fed the hungry, educated the community, and stood as powerful symbols of resistance and resilience. Despite their incredible sacrifices, loving and serving the people did not come with retirement plans or financial security. So, now it's our time to honor their legacy and ensure that they are cared for with the dignity they deserve. You can help by attending and supporting A Night with the Panthers, Saturday, February 22nd, 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Project 43 Team Post Center, 6841 Crenshaw Boulevard, Los Angeles. For more information, contact Black Panther Party Breakfast at gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. That's Black Panther Party Breakfast at gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, the Friday edition, end of the week. So honored that you're joining us on KBLA Talk 1580 AM. My very special guest today is Diallo Brooks, who's dedicated his career to working for social justice through government, philanthropic, and nonprofit advocacy institutions. He was the former senior equity fellow at the U.S. Department of Education, where he was on loan from the Schott Foundation for Education. In this role, his focus was on addressing equity and justice issues within the education system. I asked Diallo to join us today because everything in Washington, D.C. obviously is upside down. Elon Musk has run through the Treasury Department, now seeks at Donald Trump's suggestion, as well as the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio's suggestion, to dismantle the United States Agency for International Development. And they say the Federal Department of Education is next. Diallo Brooks, welcome to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Today we want to discuss what the Federal Education Department does, why it is so important around the idea of building a more perfect union for all Americans, and some of the inequities that it seeks to address. Good afternoon, Diallo.
Good afternoon, Jesse. Thank you again for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
I'm honored that you're here. I'm sorry.
Definitely. I'll start off talking a little bit about kind of the role of the U.S. Department of Education, just to clarify for folks what the department actually does. So a lot of the work is centered around moving resources down to the state and local level, resources that are allocated by Congress to support education, various pieces of education, everything from teaching and learning to curriculum, to actually supporting teacher diversity within communities around the country. And also, one of the big roles of the U.S. Department of Education is to provide civil rights protections for folks around the country. So to intervene and to step in and rectify any civil rights issues that may emerge, to investigate those issues and then bring resources to those localities to support folks on the ground around those issues. And so with the changes that that are afoot, some of those protections that we are used to seeing may go away. Some of those resources that we're used to seeing, the grants that are moving down to the state level, may go away, or they may be harder to obtain. So some of that money might be in a pot, but might not go to the places that need those resources the most. So that's kind of the impact that we'll see on communities based on some of the changes that are afoot.
So in the mind of Donald Trump and some of his sycophants, if you will, in Washington, D.C., they see the federal Department of Education as some kind of big DEI supporting institution?
Yeah, I mean, I can't read their minds, but I think that they like to use DEI as a wedge word, just like they did with critical race theory. Folks didn't understand it, didn't know what it meant. But to me, the opposite of diversity is not having diversity. The opposite of equity is not having equity, where people are not treated equally. And then, so their mission is to eliminate that, but their mission is to eliminate the resources that are going to those communities, right? The communities have often been left behind by funding formulas that states put in place, closing the gap around making sure that kids have lunches, have food so they can be present in the classroom as they're learning. And then also around some of the programming that may happen within schools. I mean, one of the roles of the department too is also to provide some guidance to states as well. So as new ideas emerge, is providing some guidance. So there's some kind of level playing field across the country in this hodgepodge of education systems that we have in this country.
Can you share with our listeners your thoughts on the civil rights enforcement aspect of the Department of Education when it comes to educational equity? For example, disabilities. Let's say, for example, some school districts want to teach Spanish to their students. Well, you find a Spanish-speaking pool of people to hire to teach Spanish 1, Spanish 2. Such a program might be considered diversity in this environment.
Yeah, so those are some of the problems that may emerge as well. But a lot of what may be a bigger issue is if folks are facing discrimination within their school systems, not having a place to go to have recourse around those issues. The past administration, the Biden administration, the Civil Rights Department within the Department of Education actually investigated thousands and thousands of cases, meaning they went in, gathered the facts, and provided some guidance around rectifying those situations. So whether it been around disability, whether it been around racial discrimination that may have happened within those schools, those things under this new administration likely may go away. But I think it's also important for communities to continue to advocate for the department to do its actual job.
One final question before we come forward, Diallo, on the question of enforcement. Once again, racial diversity, disability enforcement, LGBTQ security. These are definitely people who, students, as well as families that may be impacted by dismantling the federal education department. Of course, we will discuss these issues when we come forward. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, and Diallo Brooks is our special guest.
The station you turn to when you had it up to gear with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-550-9651. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS. Generous programs are now available that can give you a fresh start. Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems. We have over 1,000 5-star reviews on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com or call 800-550-9651. That's 800-550-9651. Tax Relief Advocates, real solutions for real people.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you, neighbor to neighbor, bringing you resources and what you need to know. For up-to-the-minute info on distribution hubs, help, and volunteer opportunities in the Altadena area, please visit Neighborhood Servants or Pasadena Community Coalition on Instagram. The Wild Seed Collective is offering free grant workshops to businesses impacted by the LA wildfires. Find them at wildseedcollective.com. Fuller Psychological and Family Services is offering 12 free therapy sessions to people impacted by the fires who are unable to access care. Contact Executive Director Dr. Ted Koss at tedkoss@fuller.edu. Grief and Hope, the LA Art World Mutual Aid Relief administered by The Brick, is offering help to artists impacted by the blazes. Info is available at the/brick.org. On Instagram, Mutual Aid LAN is updating a Google Sheet in real time with locations, verified GoFundMe sites, and current resources. If you haven't done so yet, it's still a good idea to sign up for Notify LA on your phone for fire alerts and updates. Praying, advocating, and standing with you. KBLA Talk 1580.
It's KBLA Talk 1580's third annual Black History Month luncheon, and you're invited. This is year 2 of our climate justice work, and this year's $2 million 12-month campaign is all about linking and combating the relationship between climate and Black health. We already know that these wildfires will leave in their wake even greater inequities, including negative impacts on Black health, given the toxic air pollutants circulating in the air we breathe. So, as part of this year's climate campaign, we're honoring Black doctors and leaders in healthcare at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Friday, February 28th at noon. If you would like to join us, just go to our KBLA 1580 website and register for your chance to be our guest at the luncheon. We'd love to see you. And in case you haven't heard the news, KBLA Talk 1580 was just named one of the semifinalists for the American Climate Leadership Awards 2025. Caring about the climate, caring about the community, changing the conversation. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down. We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
This is Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Diallo Brooks, who was a senior equity fellow at the U.S. Department of Education, and he was on loan from the Schott Foundation for Public Education. Diallo, welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Jesse.
So, Diallo, the Department of Education, I want our listeners to be able to wrestle with this question of clarity. Reaches into the states, it reaches into the counties, it reaches into literally thousands of education systems, and it seeks to create balance where tax bases are out of whack with the quality of education. Those school districts, for example, where the primary method of funding the local school system might be a coal mine. And those children, their futures are essentially limited to the idea that, well, one day they'll be in a deep hole digging coal. The U.S. Department of Education reaches into that community, provides them with the highest standard of available public education through grants so that those children might exercise in their thinking, those families, those parents, that there is a future beyond a coal mine for their children. The next generation can obviously do better. Right. With that said, when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I mean, the idea that we even need DEI, from my perspective, is because white male leadership has been the dominant factor in public education throughout our country. It's been the dominant factor in the Republican Party, in the Democratic Party. We have no shortage of white male presidents of the United States, white male congressmen, white male U.S. senators. We are now entering an era of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that means blacks and browns and women and the disabled and the LGBTQ and people who have been historically discriminated against. My understanding of the Department of Education is it has played a significant role in trying to create the balance necessary for a high quality education. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so the role of the department is to help resource where there's gaps. And so there's been billions of dollars from this previous administration, from the Biden administration, that was pushed out into the state to fill those gaps. All the gaps that you named and many more. Some of those resources are around supporting the educators, the folks that are actually in the classroom, making sure that they have the tools necessary. Some of it is to support the community around the schools. It's everything from, career and technical education supports, resources there that are connected to our community colleges. There's resources that are going to HBCUs. There's resources that are going to so many facets of the education system to help fill the gaps. And as you know, we have this dispersed system of education where, we live in this country, quote unquote, states' rights, where there's education systems in each of the states around the country. And most of the budget for education comes out of those states, right? But the federal government plays a role in supporting and supplementing that as well. And like I said, too, some of it is also helping to solidify best practices in the education space. So bringing the knowledge and expertise from around the world in education to bear to support folks on the ground in the education environment. So it's a benefit add to places around the country. It doesn't close all the gaps. It doesn't fix everything that's wrong with some of the education system, but it also provides resources that, if you took them away, would create even more disparity than we see now.
So education in the United States, again, for our listeners, is a state right. So you end up with 50 different state education systems. It's also, at the local level, handled in many states at the county level, right, or suburban and rural communities. So you have 3,400 different county-based education systems. There are approximately 20,000 municipalities in the United States. Some of them are large cities, but they're also small cities. So you have 20,000 different municipal education systems, all separate, all unequal, inherently so by virtue of the fact that education is handled at the local level. And you have this one coordinating entity that strives to build a more perfect union, that strives to coordinate, when the resources are available, the disparities that exist within these school systems. So that's one function for the Department of Education, which this administration seeks to close. Let me shift now to the end of First Reconstruction, when the newly freed slaves had just exited the peculiar institution, and they were coming into contact with reading and with writing and education for the first time. And a number of land grant institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, because of segregation, because of racism, because of separate and unequal laws within the states that kept Blacks and whites separate and would not allow African Americans to attend public schools, historically Black colleges and universities emerge in this particular context. Please share with our listeners the role of the Department of Education in supporting historically Black colleges and universities?
Well, it's a tremendous role. I mean, it's one where the department is able to provide resources to those schools, and oftentimes those schools receive less resources than their white counterparts. And there's unfair funding balances on the state level that support particularly the state institutions. And so the department provides resources and supports. One of the interesting things of working at the department is there was a White House initiative on HBCUs. So there was a special initiative specifically focused on HBCUs, and it was housed in the Department of Education. And those folks worked with the presidents of those universities to provide supports and trainings and information sharing in ways that help bolster the outcome for those students in those universities around the country. And so as we look at the shift in the dynamics, the momentum that we see that's happening in the wrong direction around this new president, there's a lot of fear that some of those supports and a lot of that supports and a lot of the resources will go away. And you see that bleeding into states where there's, governors making decisions, budget decisions that undermine those schools as well. And so, like I said, I always lean into the advocacy and the organizing role that we must play at all times. We can't ever take our foot off the pedal in pushing on the local level, state level, and federal level around the things that we need for our communities.
One of those institutions is Hampton University. I had Dr. William Harvey on my program just a week or so ago. And Dr. Harvey wanted to remind our listeners that Hampton University has, I believe, 4 satellites in space. How is that possible without the Department of Education and NASA and federal funding? They have a proton therapy institute for cancer research and cancer alleviation, if you will. When you think about the magnitude of Howard University, from its medical school to its Department of Engineering, to its law school, to all of the institutions that are part of the Howard University. Howard University is one of the single largest benefactors among HBCUs for grants from the Department of Education. Indeed, all 110 or so that are left are beneficiaries of the Department of Education in every conceivable program within those schools. Shutting down the Department of Education fundamentally changes that coordination, does it not?
Oh, it definitely does. And let's put this into context as well. Look at the amount of talent that comes out of the Black talent for our communities that comes out of the HBCU system. Everything from doctors, everything from engineers. There's an overwhelming amount of talent that comes out of these institutions. So there's a necessity to support and fund these institutions at the highest level to make sure that we're continuing to nurture and develop these amazing minds that have come out of these universities across the country.
I would imagine that without this coordination, you end up with increased disparities, the potential closing of HBCUs, the absence of the training necessary. Dr. Harvey, for example, shared with me that his institute, William Harvey Institute, is responsible for 18 or more presidents and administrators in major colleges and universities around the country. He never saw these people as diversity, equity, and inclusion candidates, but in the recruitment pool for who should be president of a university, in the recruitment pool of who should be the head of a medical school or a law school, his institute specifically trains people of color to be available for that pool. And that pool has been so successful that 18 people have been hired, and no other African-American is serving historically Black college or university has ever created that dynamic.
And if you look at across the spectrum of issue areas, whether it be from financial literacy or financial support, whether it be from environmental support, whether it be doctors and lawyers, all of the things that touch our community, it is folks that look like us that serve us best. And these institutions promote and graduate folks that are of value to our community in excess of any other institution in this country. And so, having that shut down has a disparate impact on our communities by lessening the talent that's available and lessening the skills and training that our folks will be able to get. And also, particularly as DEI is under attack in PWI institutions, there are going to be less Black students, Black, brown, and other students attending those universities. And so where do they go? Where does that talent go? And how does that impact our communities?
When you think about Howard University, its medical school is also a training hospital for other schools, hospitals, and universities around the country. You think about Xavier and FAMU, their schools of pharmacy. As you know, many pharmacists within the African American community, whether they are at Walgreens or CVS, or they're compoundists themselves, family businesses that compound and create necessary prescriptions at lower costs for African Americans. The idea that the Department of Education may no longer be there to provide these critical services when pharmaceutical services in the African American community are delivered fundamentally different than those who have prescription drugs from the big pharma manufacturers.
Exactly. And so as you're seeing, it's like there's this ripple effect beyond just education that this has on our communities. And like I said, and I always want to lean back into the organizing perspective, because it's a moment of challenge, but out of challenge emerges opportunity to re-engage our communities, to have the deep down conversations about what's happening, and to make sure that our voices are elevated. And we're pushing our government works for us, not the other way around, pushing our government to respond to our needs. There's a lot of gaps that exist. Those gaps are historic. We have the shortest month for Black History Month to celebrate Black history. It's on purpose. You know why that exists. So we're overcoming these disparities, and we can't sit on the sidelines during this time and be quiet while our communities are under attack specifically.
When I think about the attack that Claudine Gay experienced at Harvard University, the first time in the history of that, I think, 200-year-old institution, an African American had been selected as president of the institution. She served for 6 months before she lost her job over essentially saying what other professors and presidents were saying in a congressional hearing. Right. But there was more at foot, she said. There's more at foot to her dismissal, hinting at the idea because she was an African American woman of color, somehow she was less than qualified. Isn't there, I heard when the president of the United States said about the tragedy over the Potomac, that somehow DEI is related to that. And then when pressed by reporters, he then turned around and said, well, let's just say the issue may be competence, as if to suggest because you've been to an HBCU or because you're a person of color, that somehow you're not competent. Your thoughts on that, Diallo?
Yeah, I mean, the DEI conversation in general is laughable because they're using it as they're actually hiding behind DEI just to cause a distraction, to have a level of hysteria within communities and say, oh, all of the problems that exist because DEI, all these unqualified folks are coming into our workforce because of DEI. When the reality is that doesn't exist. It's a fallacy. They're making it up, basically to pull the wool over folks' eyes to do the nefarious things that they're actually looking to do, because they're the ones that are unqualified. If you look at this administration, top to bottom, there's way more unqualified folks there that are there for nepotism reasons.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, and I couldn't agree with you more, Diallo Brooks. There's some mighty unqualified people in this administration. When we come forward, Diallo Brooks.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. The Department of Justice has agreed to not release a list of FBI agents investigating January 6 cases until the court rules on an injunction. If reversed, they must give 2 days' notice. The agreement follows a lawsuit by FBI employees seeking to block its release. Black New York City Mayor Eric Adams will testify at a GOP hearing on sanctuary cities March 5th alongside mayors from Boston, Chicago, and Denver. House Republicans accuse them of prioritizing illegal immigrants over Americans, but Adams insists violent offenders should not be on New York City streets regardless of status. Atlanta may sell 20,000 acres bought decades ago for a possible airport. The state offered $100 million for conservation, but Black Mayor Andre Dickens says no decision has been made. And Netflix has scrapped its Prince documentary after nearly 7 years, citing a mutual agreement with the estate. I'm Amber Payton on the Black Information Network, your home for Black News First.
New year, fresh start. Why not with better water? LifeSource Water gives you clean, filtered water from every tap with no salt and no frequent maintenance. Call 800-WATER-99 or visit lifesourcewater.com today. Warranty limitations apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Former Chargers tight end Antonio Gates did not play football in college. He was ignored in the 2003 NFL Draft. None of the NFL's 32 teams thought Gates was worth a draft pick, mainly because he played basketball at Kent State University. The Chargers took a chance on Gates and signed him as a free agent. 22 years later, Gates was selected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, class of 2025. The induction ceremony is August 2nd in Canton, Ohio. Gates, an 8-time Pro Bowler, played all of his 16 seasons with the Chargers. He retired in 2018. His 116 touchdown catches is the all-time record for NFL tight ends. Gates also holds the Chargers record for most receptions, 955, and most receiving yards, 11,841. Gates is the 15th Chargers player to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
They can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary.
On Saturday, February 22nd, you are invited to A Night with the Panthers, a special fundraiser dedicated to supporting Black Panther veterans who now require assistance with essential needs such as medicine, food, and housing. These Black Panther veterans championed human rights, fed the hungry, educated the community, and stood as powerful symbols of resistance and resilience. Despite their incredible sacrifices, loving and serving the people did not come with retirement plans or financial security. So, now it's our time to honor their legacy and ensure that they are cared for with the dignity they deserve. You can help by attending and supporting A Night with the Panthers, Saturday, February 22nd, 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Project 43 Team Post Center, 6841 Crenshaw Boulevard, Los Angeles. For more information, contact Black Panther Party Breakfast at gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. That's Black Panther Party Breakfast at gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., and welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is an education expert. His name is Diallo Brooks, and Diallo was a Equity Diversity Fellow at the Department of Education. He was on loan by the Schott Education Foundation to the Department of Education. And welcome to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, Diallo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Listen, I want to raise the larger question for our audience about the structure of education in the United States. You touched upon it. States' rights, 50 different states, 3,400 different counties, 20,000 different cities. Every school in this country is separate and unequal, even after Brown versus the Board of Education. As you know, when I was in Congress, I offered an amendment to the Constitution that would guarantee every American, all citizens shall enjoy the right to a public education of equal high quality, meaning there should be no difference between the best funded, highest quality public education system in the nation, where some schools have only 15 students. Every teacher has a master's degree and a PhD. They teach fencing, Olympic swimming, ballet, every conceivable extracurricular activity at those public schools. But when we look at the inner city, when we look in these rural areas, these are all communities that are striving and struggling for the necessary resources. But a constitutional amendment guaranteeing every American the legal right to enter into court and demand for their children, the same school that exists over there, be built in their neighborhood as well. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. Let's put this in the context. We're moving away from what the rest of the world is actually doing, right? If you look at the education, the top education systems around the world, and I have the data right in front of me, but if you look at the top education systems around the world, they're nationalized education systems, meaning their federal, their national government invests in education in a way that the entire country is umbrellaed under.
Wow.
Right? They don't disperse that to various parts of the country to do it differently in different ways all over. Now, they may innovate and learn, but there is a national kind of standard about how they approach education. And so, you know, a lot of folks on the right like to have this American exceptionalism. If we want to be exceptional, if we really want to be great, why don't we have a standardized way in which we approach education that the federal government helps to prepare, send resources, and also outline how we want to approach education, right?
You know what? You know, I'm really, really impressed, and I want to hang around this idea with you for a moment, because we have the technology as a nation to have the best geometry teacher in the nation, right, teaching geometry in 10,000 classrooms at the same time.
Right.
We have the technological means to have the best high school physics teacher teaching physics in 20,000 classrooms across the nation at the same time. In other words, it's not just a personnel issue. You've suggested that it's a structural issue as well as a national priority issue over and against dispersing it to the locals. Build that out for us, Diallo.
So if you look at education, yes, we have the resources. We're the richest nation in the world. We have the resources to do this right. This is really about will. This is about what we prioritize. And if you look at folks that are making these decisions about our educational structures, their kids don't go to the same schools that the rest of our kids go to. They're able to pluck out their kids, segregate their kids in a way, and put them in special schools that have all of the wonderful things that we say we want in schools. They have time to play. They have time to have support teachers in the classroom. They have the extracurricular activities. They have the arts and the sciences that allows those kids to grow. But then they look at the public education system and say, we don't want that for you all. And so there's a strategic approach to education where I would say folks don't want our kids to be educated. They don't want all of our children to have the resources. And that's not just Black children. That's Black children. That's LGBTQ plus children. That's children that live or come from more impoverished backgrounds. That's kids that come from rural backgrounds. They don't want them to develop the critical thinking skills. They don't want them to have the tools to push back against kind of the elite class in this country around education. And I think, it does a disservice because we have locked away so much potential for growth and development in this country because we don't do right by our children through the educational system. We don't put the resources that we need to put in to make sure every child, no matter how they learn, how they approach the education system, to give them the tools that they need to be successful. Because what we've done is train folks to be robots. We've trained folks to work in factories and to work at McDonald's and not to ask the critical questions and be critical thinkers. That's for the elite kids.
I find the subject matter fascinating because when we look at the idea of had the entire system been restructured around, for example, a constitutional amendment that actually puts the power in the hands of parents to be able to say, hey, on that side of town, you have this school. We deserve these schools on this side of town. And I legally need to challenge you in court to force the state legislature and local governments to create and build those kinds of schools. I don't think we fully appreciate just how big the job generator of reforming education at that level truly is. I mean, if the requirement from Congress were that all teachers had master's degrees and that the government was going to be responsible for their education, it would change the very nature of the middle class and create an influx of potential teachers into the system because their education is essentially paid for to achieve a national purpose. I mean, just the coordination that you recommend, Diallo, is something that is beyond the imagination of the American people at present.
Yeah, it's beyond the imagination because we painted a picture and we've closed the door to actually using your imagination. It actually comes out of the school system, right? Those of us that went to schools where we're allowed to think critically and taught to think critically will ask those questions. Those where they say, okay, you can only focus on 1, 2, 3 and reading this book. Don't ask those questions because they're not trained to think in that way. And so the disparities are real. And you bring up that example. I did an experiment. I was working for another organization years ago, and it was in Chicago, where a minister in Chicago took Chicago public school students out to try to register them into one of the neighboring suburban public schools. And when you drove from inner city Chicago to the suburban public school where they had this sprawling campus, and you mentioned this before, sprawling campus.
That sounds like Reverend Meeks. Were you with Reverend Meeks?
I was with Reverend Meeks, and we went out there and tried to register. And it was more of just to show the disparities. And the parents in those schools even said it's unimaginable to them that the kids in Chicago don't have they deserve the same types of schools that my kids go to, that have the tennis courts and the swimming pools and the you walk from one building to another building, the sprawling campuses, and have all the resources available, and the teachers have the supports that they need to be successful. That's the type of education system that we're dealing with, is breaking down those barriers.
I am so glad that show you how small the world is, Diallo. I had no idea that you knew Reverend Senator Meeks. And I remember when he was on that campaign to bring parents from these schools into the city to show them where our children are in school, and then to take parents and children from our schools and show them the opportunities that existed in those schools. And to the number, every child wanted to transfer to the suburban school to the school where the opportunity was so different. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, and my very special guest is Diallo Brooks.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
For 75 remarkable years, our Authors Study Club has partnered with the City of Los Angeles to present African American Heritage Month celebrations. This Friday, February 7th, Mayor Karen Bass and Council President Marquise Harris Dawson will continue this extraordinary tradition with a Diamond Anniversary celebration for the ages. Join Honorary Chair Yvonne Wheeler, President of the LA County Federation of Labor, as we honor today's champions. Join actor and author Courtney B. Vance at the Central Library on Saturday, February 8th for a conversation on Black men healing. Additional free events will continue throughout the month of February, sponsored by the Brotherhood Crusade, LA Metro, and ABC7. Don't miss your chance to be part of this month-long unprecedented legacy. For more information and to RSVP, log on to oascla.org. This is your moment. This is our history. This is Los Angeles leading the nation again.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you, neighbor to neighbor, bringing you resources and what you need to know. For information on fire recovery resources, recovery hubs, and available services, call 211 for the City of Los Angeles and 311 countywide. Aid distribution locations, repopulation updates, and safety rules are constantly changing. Visit the LA City and LA County websites for the latest. If you'd like to sign up for the county's free debris removal, fill out a right of entry form, or get a list of disaster recovery centers that are still active, please visit recovery.lacounty.gov or call the debris hotline at 844-347-3332. If you're vulnerable to mudslides with rain in the forecast, free sandbags are being offered. Go to lacounty.pw/sandbags to find out where to get them. Businesses who have lost their facilities due to the fires can use a regional online source to get free or discounted locations. Whether you're interested in donating or finding space, you can visit the business-to-business Space Share portal at spaceshare.lacounty.gov. Additional LA County small business support and programs can be found at opportunity.lacounty.gov. Praying, advocating, and standing with you. KBLA Talk 1580.
It's been said that when someone you love has Parkinson's, you have Parkinson's.
The Parkinson's Foundation knows that the disease doesn't just affect the diagnosed. It affects everyone who supports and helps care for them.
If you have questions, the Parkinson's Foundation has answers.
We can help you understand the disease
and give you tips for living a better life.
Find your answers at parkinson.org or call 1-800-473-4636. The Parkinson's Foundation. Better lives together.
Life blooms in beautiful ways. The Afia Center invites you to celebrate At the End with Red Gala, honoring the strength and resilience of Black women living with HIV. Join us for an evening of empowerment as we launch the Barbara Cambridge Scholarship and kick off Herstory Month with our theme, Life in Full Bloom. Your support helps create vital HIV programming and builds a future where every voice is heard and every story matters. The End with Red Gala, because every flower deserves to bloom. To learn more and to donate, visit theafiacenter.org.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
Hey!
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Great music. My very special guest is Diallo Brooks. In the coming show on Monday, our very special guest will be none other than the national president of the National Urban League, Mark Morial will be joining our show for an hour, where we're going to be discussing the Trump administration, the reaction and response from African-American civil rights organizations under his leadership. This past week, we enjoyed Reverend Al Sharpton from the National Action Network. We're looking forward to President Derek Johnson of the NAACP at some point in time in the not so distant future joining us. And also the National Council of Negro Women. We expect their president to join us as well. And so we'll be doing that right here on KBLA 1580 AM. But now we come forward with Diallo Brooks. Diallo is a senior fellow who was an intern as well as a diversity, equity, and inclusion fellow at the Department of Education on loan from the Schott Education Foundation for Education. Diallo, welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Jesse.
Diallo, where do we go from here? What's next?
What's next is that we can't wallow in despair in this moment. I think when we have these moments of challenges, there are opportunities for us to organize. I think that over time, we've dropped the ball in really organizing our communities about the needs that we have. And it's a time to really lean in, to connect with one another, to lift up the voices of community about what we really want and what we really need, and do that hard work of building that infrastructure. There's going to be an election in 2 years that can change the tide of Congress, what Congress looks like. That can be a stopgap to what's happening with this president. So there can be organizing around that. But we need to build the capacity and make sure that we're educating each other around what's really happening. These are our tax dollars at play, and we have to demand even an administration that we don't agree with to spend those tax dollars in ways that benefit our communities. And so we have to be loud about that. We have to be organized about that. We have to connect with one another about that. And also we have to give each other some grace and some love and support in a moment of difficulty.
Diallo, you've been a community organizer around the country and nationally. Do you find this particular climate difficult to organize in for the kind of advocacy that you know is necessary to save some of our priorities?
It can be difficult, particularly since this is the second time around we've seen the Trump administration, and it seems to be even worse than before. But also in these moments, there becomes clarity, a clarity about the forces that are moving against our community. And it's an opportunity to unify folks to really bridge the gap. And like I said, it's an opportunity to unlock the power within communities. Oftentimes we say we want to empower communities. Communities already have power. They just don't always realize it, and they need to unlock it, come together, and they need to make sure that they're heard in the process. This is a time to really shift the tide and really to do the deep dive work that we need to do to really connect with our folks and not just separate. We've oftentimes separated and left folks behind. This is a time to come back together to build with strength.
You know, Diallo, when I think about the color of change, when we had these protests around the country over the killing of George Floyd, we did see a diverse crowd, but it was fundamentally led by African Americans who had borne the long, dark night of police brutality, not just where George Floyd was killed, but in cities all across our country. And we were joined by our allies. I see our allies now, potential allies, having protests around the country regarding Elon Musk and the priorities of the executive orders of the President of the United States. And those audiences, quite frankly, don't look like us, at least initially, because I think when the pain is probably distributed across the United States far greater than it's presently being distributed, you're going to see the kind of reaction from blacks and browns and whites, a kind of rainbow coalition to which I know your mother was one of the initial founders and great advocates of. Do you see the possibility of coalition building in light of the threats that the administration represents to our progress?
Oh, definitely. I see that, and I know that it will happen. I've been a part of them before. I know that it will happen again. I think for Black folks in particular, there's a little fatigue for carrying the weight in this country around organizing around the threats. But I think as that kind of wears off and folks kind of regroup and regather themselves, you'll see folks stepping up. And then there's some planning that has to happen. Sometimes you got to step back a little bit to really have some strategic thinking. And so you're not just being reactionary, but you're actually coming with a proactive plan. I think what's happened with our communities for a long time is that we've been against something, but we really haven't articulated what we're for. And that's why I love your conversation about the constitutional amendment piece, because it is actually something that we can be for. And while it might not happen right away, it can be what we're organizing towards. So as we're pushing against barriers, we're organizing for what the system could look like. It's a time to reimagine. I think it presents a lot of opportunity to awaken so many folks in our community that have been often left behind.
If you think about it, the Department of Education was founded and added to the federal bureaucracy. Let me know if I'm wrong. About 1979, Diallo?
Yes.
Right around 1979. Imagine a Department of Education funded like the Pentagon.
Wow.
Imagine a Department of Health and Human Services for the American people, where rooting out health carelessness and providing the highest standard and quality of care for the American people was a priority like the Pentagon. Imagine the national capacity. Imagine national longevity. Imagine bringing down the racial, social, and dynamic tensions associated with the discord that exists in our system if, in fact, every American was better educated. Mr. Brooks, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I want to give you the opportunity to conclude our show on some hope and your thoughts.
Yes, we have to be allowed to imagine. I love that word, because we have to envision what our future is going to look like. We have to move toward that and have the time to create. And then how we do that is really focus on the hyper local. Like really look at small groups, sometimes just friends and family members, and bringing folks together to have real conversations, and that builds out from there. Sometimes we have to think about, oh, we have to have these huge organizations. No, sometimes we need to break down barriers within our small circles to provide information, to provide hope and support for one another, and then use that as a catalyst to really propel a movement forward to create change.
I'm convinced, Diallo, that you're going to be one of the leaders of that movement. And we are excited to be followers of the steps that you're going to plant for us as we seek together to build a more perfect union. And as we say at the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, under your leadership, the sky's the limit. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. My very special guest has been Diallo Brooks. He's hopefully will become a regular contributor on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Until next time.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. The Department of Justice has agreed to not release a list of FBI agents investigating